How can I stop feeling pressured and stressed about applying fast? That title alone hits a nerve for anyone who's ever stared at a job posting and felt their pulse spike. In today's hyper-competitive job market, it can feel like you're racing against a clock you didn't set, with strangers you'll never meet. But here's the twist. What if the race isn't real? Today, we're unpacking that pressure and looking at what people who've been on the hiring side say actually matters. So let's zoom in from the big emotional storm to the person who's sitting in the middle of it. Someone juggling 2 jobs, family obligations, and the fear that every minute they aren't applying knocks them farther down the hiring ladder.
The poster describes feeling overwhelmed because they can't apply to job openings the moment they appear. They worry that faster applicants automatically get priority, and seeing others submit earlier makes them feel defeated before they even hit send. They ask how to stop spiraling about timing, and whether being slower really ruins their chances. With that weight hanging in the air, let's explore how different people responded and the surprising clarity they brought to a situation that feels chaotic. Just a quick welcome to Better Life FAQs. If you want more simple, practical answers like this, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Now, let's continue. First up, someone who's actually spoken to a recruiter about this. This take reveals a shocking statistic. 90% of applications are unqualified, and speed barely matters compared to substance. This perspective cuts straight through the panic by reframing what the race actually looks like. The commenter explains that most early applicants aren't dazzling competitors. They're bots and mass-applying hopefuls who aren't truly qualified. That instantly shifts the narrative from a frantic sprint to a quality-based selection process. It also highlights something hiring managers care about deeply: whether your resume clearly communicates your potential to solve their problem. That's a completely different focus than beating a clock. And the numbers help ground the conversation. If only 3 out of 100 even get a screening, then being intentional becomes your sharpest tool. Of course, this advice isn't a permission slip to procrastinate indefinitely. Jobs don't stay open forever, and waiting too long can hurt your chances. But a couple days? That's still within the human window recruiters expect. Imagine 2 applicants. One applies in 5 minutes with a copy-pasted resume. The other applies tomorrow with a polished, thoughtful one. The second person almost always stands out more. That's the heart of this comment. Thoughtful effort still wins. Now, while that comment emphasizes quality over speed, our next viewer turns towards something just as important: structure.
The next person asks a simple question: do hours even matter? This answer suggests setting daily or every other day blocks to apply, reminding us that hiring teams don't choose interviewees based on who hit submit first. This advice taps into the mental exhaustion that comes from always being on alert. The viewer proposes treating job hunting like a routine rather than an emergency, which helps dial down the constant background panic. When you create set times to browse, evaluate, and apply, you give your brain predictable boundaries, and that's incredibly calming. It also subtly challenges the myth that timing is measured in hours, when for most employers, it's measured in days or even weeks. And that shift is huge. When job seekers think in minutes, they end up spiraling. When they think in days, they regain control. Of course, a routine isn't a magic cure. If you're overwhelmed or emotionally drained, even scheduled time can feel like work, but it gives you a healthier frame than obsessively refreshing listings. Imagine applying every evening at 8 p.m. rather than the instant a job goes live. You'd still be early in the pool, but without the burnout. That's the promise of structure. But what if timing does sometimes matter? The next commenter offers a more balanced take.
This viewer says, yes, speed matters, but not the way you think. They explain that some employers close applications early, but emphasize that tailoring your resume and getting past ATS filters matters far more. This comment hits the middle ground between urgency and intention. They acknowledge that some companies do shut the door early, either because they're overwhelmed or because they hit an internal limit. That's valid, and it explains why job seekers feel so much pressure. But then they pivot to what actually moves the needle, customizing your resume and cover letter. Applicant tracking systems can be brutal. They filter out huge numbers of people long before a human ever takes a look. So even if you apply early, a generic resume could sink you. What's refreshing here is the peek behind the curtain. The commenter has hiring experience and shares real numbers. Sometimes only 4 or 5 applications out of 100 survive the first screening. That means the poster's biggest advantage isn't speed, it's alignment. The comment encourages the poster to apply as soon as reasonably possible, but not at the expense of thoughtfulness. Imagine rushing to apply in an hour versus taking the evening to fine-tune your resume. In most cases, the second scenario wins. It's a grounding perspective in a moment that feels chaotic. And speaking of chaos, the next commenter brings the focus back to something simple. Stop obsessing over being first.
Another viewer cuts straight to it. Racing doesn't get you hired. They argue that being first doesn't matter. Hiring managers choose based on quality, not speed, and panicking only drains your energy. This perspective taps into the emotional core of the poster's stress. It's not just about timing, it's about the fear of missing out and the belief that being late equals being overlooked. The commenter flips that assumption on its head. They remind us that many hiring teams don't even start screening right away. They collect a pool first, then evaluate matches. That means applying later in the day or even tomorrow doesn't automatically drop you to the bottom. They also highlight something deeply true. Anxiety tricks you into thinking you control more than you actually do. When you believe that timing is everything, you put pressure on yourself that isn't grounded in reality. And that burnout costs you way more than a few hours of delay. This comment reconnects the process to humanity. You can't always apply instantly because you have a life, and hiring teams know that. It's a simple insight, but a powerful one, especially for someone who feels like they're constantly racing a shadow. And that shift from urgency to intention can make the entire process feel less suffocating. But what about practical strategies to reduce the pressure? The next commenter has an idea.
Here comes a straightforward solution. Schedule your applications. They suggest preparing materials after work and scheduling them to send later, emphasizing that meeting the deadline matters far more than being early. This comment offers a clean, actionable hack for someone who feels trapped by their schedule. By preparing applications when you're free and scheduling them for the next morning, you eliminate the pressure of real-time responding. It also reinforces that most hiring teams aren't monitoring timestamps minute by minute. They care about whether you meet requirements, not whether you clicked at 3 p.m. or 9 a.m. This method can also create a sense of control in a process that often feels unpredictable. But it's important to recognize that for someone dealing with anxiety, even simple solutions can feel heavy. Still, the logic is reassuring. Pace matters less than completion. If you consistently apply within the first few days, you're doing what hiring teams expect. And this trick can help break the mental spiral by separating the application work from the moment you find the listing. It's a small shift with a big psychological payoff. Now, stepping back from timing altogether, our next commenter adds a broader view of today's job market.
Someone else points out a bigger issue. The job market itself has changed. They highlight that the market has weakened, encourage applying when possible, and warn that platforms like Indeed aren't as reliable as they once were. This comment brings a needed dose of realism. The stress job seekers feel isn't just personal, it's systemic. The viewer acknowledges that the market has tightened and that fewer platforms are delivering real opportunities. That context matters because it reframes the poster's anxiety. It's not that they're doing something wrong. It's that the environment has shifted. Their note about Indeed becoming unreliable echoes a frustration many job seekers share. Spam, dead-end listings, and minimal responses all feed the sense of urgency and hopelessness. By encouraging the poster to use Indeed only as a search engine and apply directly on company sites, this commenter offers both caution and a solution. and there's comfort in knowing others feel the same pressure. Shared struggle makes the burden lighter. They also remind the poster that having a job, even if it's not ideal, provides stability while searching. That validation helps soften the fear that delays will ruin everything. Ultimately, the message is clear. The pressure isn't about timing. It's about navigating an unpredictable market with realistic expectations. Now that the larger picture is clearer, the next commenter addresses the timing myth head-on with a surprising twist.
This viewer reveals a little-known detail. Applying first might actually be worse. They explain that many systems sort applications newest to oldest, meaning early applicants can end up buried at the bottom. This insight flips the entire fear narrative inside out. If applicant tracking systems display the most recent entries on top, then applying too early might actually hide your application rather than help it. That's a game-changing detail for anyone who feels like timing is everything. The comment also emphasizes that hiring managers aren't obsessively refreshing listings or keeping track of who applied at 2 p.m. versus 7 p.m. Most are busy, distracted, or days behind on their inboxes. Knowing that can dramatically reduce the emotional pressure to respond instantly. It also brings the focus back to consistency rather than urgency. Applying within the first week keeps you well within the relevant window. And the comment adds something subtle but important. Hiring managers often don't even know when HR posts a job. That disconnect highlights how much of the panic is built on assumptions rather than reality. It's the kind of truth that can make a stressed-out job seeker breathe a little easier. But what if someone still feels like timing defines their chances? The next commenter offers a gentler reframing.
Our next viewer brings empathy into the mix. They reassure the poster that quality, fit, and clarity matter more than being first, encouraging them to focus on doing their best rather than beating the competition. This comment softens the experience by acknowledging the emotional pressure the poster feels. It reminds them that employers understand job seekers have lives, obligations, and limits. That's an important message because so much job search anxiety comes from believing you have to be superhuman to stay competitive. The viewer highlights the real priority, a clear, thoughtful application that genuinely reflects your strengths. That's what hiring managers remember, not the timestamp. The advice to reframe the process as doing your best instead of racing others is deceptively powerful. It shifts the mindset from scarcity to self-trust. It's also a helpful reminder that the right fit isn't determined by a few hours difference in submission time. Imagine two candidates. One rushes and one reflects. Employers can feel the difference. This comment roots the entire process back in human connection rather than mechanical urgency. And finally, one viewer offers a high-tech shortcut, though not without its complications. The last commenter shows up with a tech solution. They promote a tool that scans and applies to jobs automatically, offering speed without effort. This suggestion taps directly into the poster's fear about timing by presenting a simple fix. Let a tool do it for you. For someone feeling overwhelmed, that promise might sound like a lifeline. Automation can help manage volume or organization, especially when job searching feels impossible to keep up with. But it also raises questions about authenticity and fit. Hiring teams can usually spot auto-generated applications, and many are wary of tools that send generic resumes en masse. While a platform like this might save time, it risks reducing the personal touch that actually makes a candidate memorable. That tension reflects a bigger theme in modern job hunting, balancing efficiency with sincerity. And while automation can lighten the load, it can't replace the narrative and clarity that hiring teams look for. So this suggestion is a tool, not a shortcut to avoid the process entirely. With all these viewpoints laid out, a clearer pattern begins to emerge.
Across all these responses, a shared message rises to the surface. Timing matters far less than your anxiety tells you. What truly counts is clarity, consistency, and alignment. When you treat the job search like a relationship rather than a race, you reclaim control over a process that often feels chaotic.
If you're spiraling about applying too late, remember this: hiring isn't a stopwatch event. Applying within a reasonable window, a day or two, even a few, keeps you competitive. What separates strong candidates from the crowd isn't how fast they click, but how well they communicate their value. Create a routine that supports you rather than pressures you. Tune your resume to the job rather than rushing, and remind yourself that hiring managers don't have timers running. They're just looking for someone who fits. Give yourself permission to be human in the process. The goal isn't to win a race, it's to find a match. And if we slow the pace and let the final thoughts settle, take a moment to breathe and imagine what job searching could feel like without the clock ticking in your ear.
Thanks for listening, and remember, you're not behind, you're just on your own timeline. Keep showing up with intention, not urgency. Jobs come and go, but clarity and confidence travel with you. Until next time, take care and keep applying at a pace that respects your life.